Catriona, it's been great to have you at the school this week, not only because you're local here in Brighton as an SPR, but also because you've been so helpful to in the organisation of the course. But it's also interesting just to reflect a little bit on how you see your experience this week from a British perspective, from the perspective of a British resident.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I've really enjoyed it. It's been a great week. I've obviously discovered lots of similarities with the European doctors and also some differences. And one thing that I have been thinking about particularly today is the way the general internal medicine training is slightly different alongside the specialty training. They seem to do more of the internal medicine before specialising. For example, in Germany it's about 5 years and then 2 years of specialty. Whereas I think in England we're moving towards a focus of people concentrating on their specialty, and the GIM or internal medicine component is maybe being slightly ignored or pushed to the side a little bit.
I mean, do you think that's a good thing in terms of increasing technology and so on leads to increasing specialisation? Is that a good thing for patients, or?
Well, there's pros and cons. If in terms of reaching a diagnosis, I think maybe it would be better for us to actually go back to concentrating on our general skills. Once a diagnosis is reached, it's probably better to see a specialist. But for those patients where you're just not quite sure, it's made me reflect and think maybe we should actually, do some more teaching and cases and training and in general internal medicine like the Europeans do, because they seem to have much more of a focus on the general medicine first and the specialty second.
So this is dealing with undifferentiated problems. And really, the internist as a detective in a sense.
That's right, yeah.
And I mean, of course, this week we've had a great selection of cases. Do you want, how have you found that?
Well, there's been some kind of MRCP typical cases, Graves' disease, endocarditis, but then I've also found interesting a few conditions I've never heard of, like tularemia from Turkey, and the hemorrhagic fever spread by hantavirus, which is quite common in Finland, but I'd never heard of. So I think it's been a good mix of unusual things that maybe you'll just be more aware of in the future, as well as going over some classic cases.
And how important do you think it is, how useful have you found case presentations in the overall programme of the week?
Oh, they've been the highlight for me, the case presentations, really. Going back to the point I said before about when there's a patient and you're just not quite sure, those difficult patients, just to have a broad differential is really important, I think.
So in a way, this is a refreshing clinical reasoning. Is that what you feel about the cases?
Yeah.
And what about obviously the other aspects? We've had some workshops and some lectures. How do you think those have worked as part of the programme?
I think the workshop right at the beginning of the week was a good icebreaker, talking about the differences in our training, and then since then the CPCs,
Clinico-Pathological Conferences.
Don't know what it stood for. I think they've also been really valuable and actually interesting, and we've all approached them in kind of broadly a similar way, I think, those cases.
Does that surprise you, given the differences in the systems of internal medicine in Europe?
It did surprise me, but I think everyone's just got the same thought process approaching those cases. So.
Now you came to the school having had a little bit of experience in working in Europe. And have you? What's been your experience with other countries other than France, where you worked?
With other countries.
Just in terms of the people you've met this week.
This week. Well, there's lots of things to say. Like I was saying before, they seem to have a lot of countries have more of a focus on internal medicine. In the French, for example, they start their internal medicine training right from day one, so they don't have those experiences that we seem to have in our foundation years, GP and emergency, and we've had discussions about whether it's important or not to experience other specialties outside of medicine, surgery and accident and emergency. I think it probably isn't actually. I've changed my mind about that. I used to think it was good to have experience in those other areas, but this week I think maybe not so much.
And this week also you've had the workshops on critical appraisal and teaching skills. Was that something you were familiar with?
I had actually used the critical appraisal tools before, yes, I was familiar with those websites, but I think it's always useful to go over papers because you learn something new every time in ways to analyse a paper, so they were really good sessions.
I mean, you know, of course, you knew a little bit about the school before you came, but were there any surprises for you when you actually took part in the school?
I think the nice surprise is just the social networking skills that have been made. Everyone's got on really well and has intentions to keep in touch in the future, and people are already talking about exchanges. And as I've mentioned to you, I hope to write up a summary of this week with one of the Italian girls and one of the Danish girls. So fostering those links, I think, you know, it's hard to say right now where that will take us, but hopefully we'll keep those relationships going.
Now, your specialty is in acute medicine,
yeah.
And did you talk to people about acute medicine in Europe?
Acute medicine doesn't seem to really exist in Europe at the moment. Their general internal medicine is more of a combination of acute medicine and medical clinics that we don't have as much in acute medicine. And I think it'd be nice actually if we did have some more general outpatients. So maybe that's something in the future that will come in under the role of acute medicine.
And yet the interesting thing was that almost all the cases they present were acute problems.
That's right, yeah.
So in a sense they're all doing acute medicine, and,
Yeah.
and a lot of the diagnostic problems were in the acute area. And this is something which is obviously which I think is developing in some countries. We heard from Spain it's beginning to develop. So these are links that you might be able to establish through the school as you develop your own career.
Yes, hope so.
Are there any final thoughts you'd have to take away for the school?
I just hope that we can do something similar in the UK. It's been such a rare experience this week, and maybe we can take some of the lessons we've learned and try and establish something for UK doctors.
Training in GIM.
Training in GIM, absolutely, yeah.
That's a great aspiration.
Okay.
Thank you very much again, Catriona, for your help this week.
Thank you, it's been a pleasure.